I'm Barry Shaw. This is The View from Israel. In a previous video that seemed to be very popular with a lot of you, we discussed with a guest the link, the 2,500 link, positive link between Iran, as it was then Persia, and Israel and the Jews. Today, I want to bring this up to date, and I've invited back my special guest, Namda Yazdi. Namda, welcome to The View from Israel.
Thank you, Barry. Thank you very much. And thank you for giving me this opportunity again to be with you. Thank you.
Well, thanks to you that we gave our viewers an entertaining and instructive review of relationships going back 2,500 years between your country and ours. And it's been very well received. By the way, viewers, if you want to get this, please click the subscribe button. And we'll send you copies of that as well as our future videos. But through you, Namda, I'd like to really get your opinion on how we sum up Iran. Iran, in my opinion, was once a great modern country, but it's now in the hands of what seems to be to medieval ayatollahs that have in our modern age constructed a powerful theocracy built around their religious beliefs, for which they've repressed their own people, as you probably know, in the most brutal and inhumane manners. And despite being medieval theocracy, it built a massive, modern, well-equipped army and gained hegemony around the Middle East, and also by threatening other countries and certainly threatening Israel. And also through this indoctrination and trade, and equip their practice in their obsession to export their ideology. Their ultimate aim is to submit, in my opinion, submit the West to their ideologies and bring down Western civilization as we know it. And the first prime target is obviously Israel. Do you agree with that basic assessment?
Yes, Barry, to some extent, yes, that is correct, actually. And this has been the way that this theocratic and kleptocratic, there are so many adjectives that you can put in front of the name of that regime, have been doing over years, over the last 45 years. Obviously, as you said, Iran was a progressive country under the rule of Pahlavis, both Reza Shah and his son Mohammad Reza Shah Pahlavi. And so it was progressing very well. It had a relationship, although de facto relationship, with Israel in the 1960s and 70s. And even a good relationship with Arab countries as well for that reason. So the Shah of Iran, Mohammad Reza Shah, had a very good sort of foreign policy in those days and was trying to be a real power in the Middle East. And he was for his own rights. He was a very progressive man, a very visionary man. He brought the country, his father Reza Shah brought the country from Middle Ages into 20th century within 16 years of his reign as king and 4 years as prime minister and the minister of war. He managed to bring Iran really out of misery and poverty into a relatively modern country, a good modern country. He brought university for us. He brought good education, modern education. He brought a proper judiciary system. All of these things, which were really the I can say the proper aspects of the Iran's revolution, Iran's constitutional revolution, constitutional movement, actually, which Reza Shah realized those in the country. And then his son, Mohammad Reza Shah, at the age of 22, when he came to the peacock throne, and he started to build the country into a real modern country, one a strong country with a good army, with good air force, everything. And that is what we were. That is where we were in 1979, when unfortunately people who have been now for 1,400 years practicing Islam as a religion which was imposed on Iranians 1,400 years ago, as we discussed in the last video, Barry, about Zoroastrianism and all the other aspects. So, yes, unfortunately, I can say that in 1979, people of Iran committed a mass suicide. A mass suicide was committed in 1979, and the mullahs, Khomeini was brought to power and his cohorts, and that is what we have been experiencing, and generations of Iranians have suffered under their rule.
So, if I may, take me back to your personal example, your personal family's example. I assume that you were a member of an Iranian family of good standing, a good level of living. So, what happened to you? Give us this as an example of what many Iranians who have managed to flee Iran under the Ayatollahs. What brought about your change of life?
Sure, yes. Well, my father was a medical doctor and a member of parliament, member of Majlis, as we call it, in Iran. And for 3 terms of parliament, two terms first, then he wasn't for 1 term, and the last term of the parliament, he came back to parliament in 1974, 74, and he was serving his people, and obviously nobody was expecting this hurricane, I can say, that came to Iran and cost us, cost lives, cost the country hugely. My father was unfortunately, like many other statesmen, politicians, army officers, high-ranking army officers, after the Islamic Revolution of 1979, was arrested in roughly, I can say, in March 1979, and unfortunately in May 1979, with many other people, every day when you were when you were turning on the radio or television or reading the newspapers, a large number of people were executed. I don't like to put the name of execution on these killings, to be honest with you. These were governmental killings. These were killings, unlawful killings that was done in those days. Execution has got a legal proceedings, legal procedure to be followed, which was never followed. Kangaroo courts that put people through them in a very short time and executed. Just to give you an example, my father was a medical doctor, and within 3 days, 4 medical doctors, the Speaker of the Parliament, Dr. Javad Saeed, one of the most famous surgeons in Iran, the anesthetists in Iran, Dr. Ameli Tehrani, and another heart surgeon, Dr. Akbar Bahaduri. Within 3 days, they were all executed. They were all killed by the regime. So you can imagine what was the situation. I was in medical school in Iran in those days, in Tehran University. I finished my first year, and as my brother was here in the UK at that time doing his PhD in University of London, we left Iran. My mother and I were probably one of the first wave of refugees, political refugees out of Iran. And in July 1979, we came to Britain and made Britain our home, essentially. So it was under terrible circumstances. Everything that we had, all our property, everything were confiscated. Even the other members of the family were put under pressure. My other members, my uncle, my aunties, other people. So situation was dire, really. Was impossible for me as a 19-year-old. Getting into the best university in Iran through a difficult sort of examination and all that. I had managed to get into medical school, but now I had to leave Iran and come over here and start all over again. So this is the story of many, many Iranians, hundreds and thousands of Iranians, now coming to millions actually, who left Iran, Barry, and came to the West, to the Western countries, European countries, and mainly to United States.
Yes, I need to tell you that my producer, Lawrence Berger, and myself made a series of videos at a time when one of the henchmen of what you were referring to, the 1988 Death Commission, foolishly made a trip to Sweden and got himself arrested. This was Hamid Nouri.
That's right.
And there was a major trial in Sweden in which Hamid Nouri was put on trial for mass murder, basically. And I interviewed various Iranians and others in a series of videos that Lawrence, my producer, and I made. And in these videos, I made the point that if Hamid Nouri, in our opinion, in my opinion, was the Eichmann to President Raisi's Hitler, because Hamid Nouri was one of the executioners of the hundreds and hundreds of Iranians who were executed silently, secretly in prisons, and it was Raisi who was signing the death warrants. Can you elucidate on this,
Yes.
particular part of Iranian history?
You are referring to the death squad. You are referring to the death squad of I think, if I'm not wrong, 87, 88, that thousands of young Iranians from different backgrounds, different political tendencies were put to death very briefly appearing in front of this death squad, whether it was Raisi or other members of that party, and were put to death, in very brutal ways. I attended myself actually here in London some years ago. We had over 10 years ago, we had what it was called Iran Tribunal in London. Iran Tribunal was like a people's tribunal, people's court, essentially, like what Bertrand Russell in the 1960s organized here in London against the Vietnam War. And this was exactly very similar to that, and actually run by a very famous Iranian lawyer who's Jewish, Iranian Jewish. And a lot of people came and gave their testimonies to this tribunal, and I sat through 2 or 3 days of that tribunal, Barry, and it was honestly difficult to bear, to hear all those testimonies of people who either survived those death squads or they had families and relatives who were killed at that time. It was really difficult, and this is just one dark episode of the last 45 years of the Islamic regime in Iran, unfortunately.
Well, I can tell you also that at the time of the trial and also the verdict in Sweden of Hamid Nouri, I and a few others tried to approach human rights organizations and certain governments as well, with the fact that this absolutely implicated the president of Iran at that time, Raisi, who was signing the death warrants for these people in order to try and have these human rights organizations bring Raisi to the International Criminal Court based on the evidence of this trial and other evidence as well that we have. But one of the disappointing things that I found, that I thought that the Iranian community, being an intelligent, well-educated, and probably well-connected communities, whether they be like you in Britain or the United States or other countries, would be impactful in their collective organizational skills in order to take effective action against the regime. And I was saddened to find out that, in fact, there was nothing effective that could be done against somebody like Raisi, who was guilty, clearly guilty, based on evidence in a court, in a Swedish court, of mass murder. And yet, same human rights organizations rushed to bring Israel to International Criminal Court and the International Court of Justice on false charges of genocide or whatever. And therefore, I want to ask you, how is it or why is it that the influential Iranian exile in various countries have not been as effective that I would have hoped in trying to get various governments to support them against the crimes of the regimes of which they have been exiled?
Well, you might be surprised, Barry, that there are so many Iranian human rights organization and lawyers, top-ranking lawyers in different countries, here in UK, in Sweden, in many countries of the world, who have been very active against these things. You know, they have been working tirelessly for years to bring these criminals to justice, to be honest with you. You know, I mean, from the top man Khamenei down to this lackey like Hamid Nouri or other people. But unfortunately, the international organization, human rights organizations, and even the international courts and things are biased to a great degree, unfortunately. And that is why we see somebody like Hamid Nouri, who was properly tried in Sweden and was his appeal was not accepted, and he went for a life term in prison, was somehow through some deals between Swedish government and the Islamic regime in Iran, they freed him in return for two Swedish citizens who were in prison in Iran. So it is unfortunate, but there are so many legal sort of proceedings in place. For example, the famous killing of Iranian dissidents in a restaurant called Mykonos in Berlin some years ago, some Kurdish dissidents and other people who were massacred in that restaurant. After that, a lot of people were indicted actually because of that the killing from top-ranking, Islamic regime people like Khamenei, like Rafsanjani in those days, and their henchmen essentially who were running the country. So I don't say that Iranians, haven't been impactful, but unfortunately they are facing a tough wall of international law and international human rights organizations and courts.
Well, I'd like to come on to certain organizations, Iranian organizations, but what could you tell me about, from an Israeli perspective, about the appeasement over the last decade or more, certainly starting from Obama and carrying on to the Biden-Harris administration, an appeasement to the Iranian regime? Do you think this is, in fact, helps in any way in regulating a new future for the people of Iran, or has it made it worse?
Not at all, not at all. Unfortunately, this appeasement has gone on for too long, really. One of the things that Iranians in exile, Iranians in opposition are raising their voice about is this appeasement with the regime in Iran. This always, reminds me of the appeasement that politicians in Europe were doing with Adolf Hitler in the 1930s. The famous scene when the British Prime Minister came out of the plane, came out of the plane and waved his paper saying that peace in our time, with Herr Hitler. And then we saw just a few months later what Hitler did to the whole world, essentially, and especially the Jewish people in those days. So but this is it. This is unfortunately has gone on for too long. And one of the things that we've been saying, because Iranian people have suffered a lot, to be honest with you, from the Democrats in America. The person who really brought about probably these mullahs to power was Jimmy Carter, the president at the time of the Islamic Revolution in Iran. He came to Iran and raised his glass to the Shah and said, "Your Majesty, you are an island of stability in Iran," but behind his back, they were preparing the way to get rid of the Shah at that time. And that is what happened. And we saw it. They had meetings, clandestine meetings with mullahs and mullahs, advisors in those days. When Khomeini was in Paris, for example, and they had meetings with his advisors. So things were going on long before Obama administration or Biden administration. But the trend has been there. Let's not forget, Joe Biden was a very close advisor of Jimmy Carter at the time, and he became a senator at the same time as well. So yes, we have been really suffering a lot from these appeasement. The person that I forgot the name was Neville Chamberlain. Neville Chamberlain, the Prime Minister of Britain, who did that appeasement speech, and then we saw what happened to the world. And this is exactly where we are in 21st century, and it is happening in front of our eyes.
Do you think this appeasement policy of the United States administrations, plural, will prevent Iran making its way to the ultimate nuclear weapon?
Possibly, because they are pretty close to that now. They have been working on nuclear weapon enrichment of uranium. One of the top Iranian foreign minister, Dr. Khaled Bari, who was again executed, killed by this regime very early on in 1979. His crime was to establish the nuclear energy for Iran, nuclear deal for Iran in those days. And look, a few years later, they embarked themselves on a full nuclear program, clandestine nuclear program that they have been running, and we can see the problem. So unfortunately, this appeasement does not help Iranian people. This is what His Royal Highness Prince Reza Pahlavi has been saying for too long now, that please empower people of Iran. Empowerment of people in Iran is the most important thing. People in Iran, the young generation, they know what they are doing. They know what they need. They are not ideological like those people who staged the so-called Islamic Revolution in 1979. And they managed to, the young people today can certainly know their way in this world. And we have seen how young Iranian people are, doing in the world, how they are showing themselves in the best places, in the best academic places, best research institutes, and even in an organization like NASA in the US, how they are excelling in their achievements. So that is the reality of the fact that Iranian people want the West, want the Western countries, United States and others, to stop their appeasement with the Islamic regime in Iran.
I have a difficult question, because I've been writing and speaking a lot about what's going on these days within both the Biden-Harris administration and what going forward, about certain individuals who are employed within the decision-making process of the White House and the State Department in America, and also some of the organizations, the NGOs, which seem to be, instead of being lobbying groups to the United States against the Iranian regime, are in fact lobbying groups for the Iranian regime that is in fact slanting US policy in the wrong direction. So as an example, I want to ask you, what's your opinion of an organization called the Iranian American Council, known as NIAC, N-I-A-C?
But there has been a lot of things going on about these lobbyist groups, these apologist groups, I call them as well. They are essentially apologists of the Islamic Republic in Iran, and they are trying to bring together countries, bring the relationships back to some kind of normality. But, I mean, how can you when a regime in Iran is having its proxies in the Middle East doing their dirty killings and dirty deeds around the world, and especially in the Middle East, how can you come and sit together with these people and have diplomacy with them, to be honest? I mean, this is the problem that we've had. And organizations like NIAC and others, a lot of academics in United States and other countries have been able to really lobby very strongly because the money of the Islamic Republic has been behind them, and they have been able to promote their cause there. NIAC some years ago went to court in United States, and they lost their case actually against an Iranian journalist and Iranian political activist who was there. And this has been the case for many others as well. So the things are not that easy for them either, but unfortunately, they have managed successfully to penetrate the US administration, and even as top advisors to Obama at the time, or even now in the White House and things like that, to promote their doctrine and say that, look, at the end of the day, you have to come into terms with this. Islamic Republic is here to stay, and the best thing is to make friends with them. So this is it, unfortunately, and a lot of Iranians are against them. There have been other cases of some academics in United States who have been put into top universities, top ranking universities in the US, and they are essentially promoting what Islamic Republic wants them to do.
But then I'll give you another example of an organization called the Iran Experts Initiative, the IEI. Now, this organization, I understood, was really drawn up to represent what you might call the Iranian diaspora communities. In other words, the people who have fled Iran and is against the regime. But in fact, what this IEA actually does is actually promoting the ideas and the interest of the Iranian regime itself within the United States administration. It's not an outside organization. It's in the State Department. It's in the White House. And it's actually giving the messaging from the regime itself. I'll give you one example. The network was funded, I have the information here because I wrote about it, and supported by the Islamic Revolutionary Guards Corps official Mustafa Zahrani, who was the point of contact person between these operatives within the US administration and the Iranian then foreign minister, Javad Zarif. What can you tell me about the infiltration of the regime within both the White House and the US State Department under the Biden and Obama presidencies?
I don't know this organization in detail. I've heard of them, but I don't know a lot about them. But certainly they have, as I said, they have managed to get into positions where they, through academic routes, especially academic routes is the best way to do it. You just fund a chair of Iranian studies, for example, at a university in the US, and that person becomes, a focal point for media, for administration in the US to contact that person and see what are his or her opinion about in Iran and in particular Islamic Republic regime. I always make this distinction, Barry, between Iran and Islamic Republic regime in Iran. They are two different things. Iranian people are totally different from this brutal regime which is ruling over them. So yes, it doesn't surprise me that there are many other organizations or individuals in the US who are lobbying, who are apologists of the Islamic regime in Iran and have penetrated, as you said, in the US administration, in the US, as advisors probably to some of the Senate members or House of Representatives in the US. Yes, we've had this, we've seen this over years, and unfortunately, it's going on. But I can say that they can't show themselves a lot these days under these phony names that you say, diaspora, Iranian diaspora, and things like that. They are trying to show themselves to the administration in the US, but essentially they are lobbying for the regime.
What can you tell me then about the two Tabatays? There's Adnan Tabatai and there's also Ariane Tabatai. Working within the administration, but my record and others as well, this is also backed up by journalists like Lee Smith, are actually working for the regime in Tehran.
I've heard of the Ariane Tabatabai because her father, Dr. Javad Tabatabai, was an Iranian thinker, philosopher, and he passed away actually a couple of years ago. And yes, everybody was surprised when they saw her at the table with U.S. administration, and these people, again, very similar story to many of them before them. We had at the time the most famous name on Iranians' lips was Trita Parsi, who was from NIAC at the time and head of NIAC. Now he works in a different position elsewhere. So these people come and go all the time. They change places. They have their sort of connections in many ways. You find in again, U.S. administration, especially the Democrat administration. A lot of these people were expelled, I can say, at the time of Trump administration in the US, but they came back again as soon as Biden was in power. So it's ongoing, and it is not just in US, it is in European countries. I bet if we look into where I am here in the UK, we have seen these sort of lobbying groups as well. We have seen it in many European countries, France, Germany, Sweden. A lot of these countries have also had these groups working very tirelessly in order to bring about some kind of normality between the Western world and Islamic Republic in Iran.
But I find it singularly shocking.
Yes.
In fact, Iranian exiles have been recruited by, as I said, in the United States, by the State Department, in the White House itself, and other high decision-making positions within the administration. And they are truly representing not the United States vis-a-vis Iran, but Iran vis-a-vis the United States. And I'll give one example of one of the sabotage I spoke about, Adnan sabotage. In an email, and I wrote this in an email in 2014, as the agreement was being made. I'm talking about the nuclear agreement, the JCPOA, by Robert Malley. In fact, Sabotai wrote to, listen to this, to Zarif, the Iranian foreign minister, who was at a meeting in Vienna, saying, as you will have noticed, we're all very willing to dedicate our capacities and resources to jointly working on the improvement of Iran's foreign relations. Iran is our country, so we too feel the need and responsibility to contribute our share. And when I say we, I mean the very group you met. In other words, you have somebody in the US administration in personal direct contact with the Iranian foreign minister, which I would have thought is against the interest of the United States. And yet the United States administration thinks it's part of their policy to allow this entertainment of the connection between people implanted within their decision-making policy, but really representing Tehran.
Yeah, that's true. That's true. And that is part of the bigger picture, Barry, of that appeasement policy. That appeasement policy that this is part of it. You know, don't be surprised to see these people. You know, I mean, Javad Zarif obviously was behind a lot of these. You know, he was very calculating and very good. You know, I mean, he was properly one of the most effective, I can say, diplomats of the Islamic Republic, and he managed to organize all these things right from beginning even until now, that he's still in the administration of Pezeshkian in Iran, and he's working probably closely with these people. It doesn't surprise me because of this appeasement policy, honestly. This appeasement has been going on for too long, and it comes a time that Iranian people will no longer buy this, to be honest. And that's the day when you won't see any of these. They will disappear. They will go into thin air and they disappear when the people of Iran decisively decide to get rid of this regime and bring about a political change, a regime change, a democratic change, and bringing a democratic government and administration into the country, and bring about some kind of normality, because Iran has been ruined over the past 45 years, and this is it.
Are you able to tell me something about the background of why Robert Malley, who was the Obama point man with Iran in the nuclear negotiations, but he was suddenly removed from his post and is being kept in silence in a sort of exile because of suspicious activities by Robert Malley, which are not being disclosed to the American people? Do you know anything about Malley's role?
Again, I've heard of it. You know, that lady Aryan Tabatabai, who you mentioned, was working closely with Robert Malley, actually. And Robert Malley, to my surprise, you know, when I found out that he's of Jewish origin, actually, and he was working there most probably against the interest of Israel, actually, as well. And again, that's part of the bigger picture, bigger game that the U.S. administration, especially under Democrats, are playing. You know, we didn't see these during the 4 years of administration of Trump, but we are seeing that now very, very obviously in Biden administration. So again, all I can say is Robert Malley has been part of these bigger picture of appeasement, and yes, as you said, they have kept it very quiet. You don't hear about him anymore at the moment. You know what happened to the investigation which was going on to see what he has done or where has it gone. So there are a lot of question marks on these things that hopefully one day we will find the answers.
I'll make one quick comment. First of all, I didn't know that Robert Malley was Jewish, but quite frankly, this doesn't hold back Jewish people being in either the Obama or Biden or perhaps any future Democrat administration being Jewish and really acting against the interest not only of the United States but of Israel. Give one example. I know that Kamala Harris, for instance, is her point man with regard to Iran is going to be another Jewish person who is Philip Gordon, who is going to be a continuation of this abstract negative US appeasement of the Iranian regime. But you mentioned, for instance, Ariane Tabatabai and Robert Malley. Robert Malley, quite right, actually appointed Ariane Tabatabai, but to join his Iran team at the State Department. And this, despite the fact that a few years before, this Ariane Tabatabai had emailed Zaharani, the Iranian foreign policy, foreign minister. This was before being appointed, telling him, in other words, this American Iranian who still had a job within the administration somewhere, emailed or didn't contact the head of the State Department, but actually emailed Zaharani in Tehran saying that she had been invited to a conference in Saudi Arabia and to Israel and asked for his advice whether she would attend. And Zaharani replied, and I have it written down because it's in my article, said, I would, first of all, she said to him, I would like to ask your opinion too and see if you think I should accept the invitation and go. And Zaharani replied, Saudi Arabia is a good case, but the second case, i.e. Israel, is better to be avoided. So here we have somebody deep in the US administration asking for personal advice, not from the president or the vice president or the head of the State Department, but from Iran itself, from Tehran itself, how she should conduct herself.
Exactly. I heard about that as well. I did hear about that, and it surprised everybody, obviously. But again, I go back to my original comment that this is part of that bigger picture, bigger policy of appeasement with Islamic Republic in Iran. And unfortunately, that has gone on for too long, especially in the last 5, 6, 7 years, that Iranian people are on the rise, and they are trying to bring some kind of normality back to their lives after 45 years of darkness, to be honest with you. Yeah.
Thank you. This is a subject that you and I are going to discuss in a further video. But first of all, thank you for this. And viewers, I think we have given you information which we hope to you will be shocking. It may be information you didn't know about. You could do your fact checking if you want. You'll find that everything that I've said here and also that I've said is correct. And please share this video with other people, because the information we're giving you is vitally important to be spread and to be known to a wider public. So click the share button, click the subscribe button. And again, thank you very much for being my guest in a very informative program.
Thank you very much, Barry, and thanks to your colleagues who prepared this program. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much. This is Barry Shaw, The View from Israel. אנחנו מכריזים בזאת